Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. The deluge of rain South Florida experienced this week was stunning. Knee-deep water, stranded cars, flooded homes and businesses. It was a reminder that Mother Nature is formidable, and while the politics of climate change denial continue to baffle me, the impacts are real and need to be addressed. The hardest hit area was the coastal stretch from northeast Miami-Dade up through Fort Lauderdale. Now, during a break in the storm, I spoke to the state senator for that area, Jason Pizzo, who's a Democratic leader next year in the Florida Senate.
Jim, Tuesday through Wednesday, pockets of the 20 cities that I represent, from Sunny Isles Beach all the way up to the Broward County and Palm Beach County line, saw anywhere from 5 to 13 inches of rain. We're at a break point right now, and we expect another rain band to come through with anywhere from 5 to 10 inches in some spots. Last April, as you know, we had tremendous flooding when the storm would just sort of sit over our district, in and around the airport especially. And this time we're seeing really bad pockets. Hallandale Beach, Hollywood still incredibly flooded, and Aventura really got it hit hard yesterday.
Were there any lessons to be learned from the response to this week's storm?
Last April, when we had the storms, I was in Tallahassee and I was slated to come back home, picked up the phone and started calling a few city managers and mayors and other elected officials just to see how they were faring with the weather. And 6.5 hours later, with the incoming Senate President, Ben Albritton, in my office, he stayed with me the whole time. We were coordinating with FHP to tow and remove cars, with Department of Emergency Management, Kevin Guthrie, to get fulfillment services for pumps and pump trucks and all that. And it really sort of demonstrated that we were not prepared. And Director Guthrie was very honest. He said, Senator Pizzo, I'm concerned if even a Cat 1 hits your district. We convened all of our cities, about 24 total actually attended, and Miami-Dade and Broward County last September. Director Guthrie laid out really the whole protocol and procedure. You know, you start with incident responses from police and fire. They report to the cities. The city managers then input their needs and requests and demands to the county. The county then, if they can't fulfill those, then requests help from the state. And then this week, we saw where some cities followed instruction and protocol and procedure excellently. Some did not. And so there's a lot of work to be done. There's two parts, Jim. There's the physical infrastructure and dilapidated parts of it, low-lying areas, not set for this stuff. I don't think these storms are so anomalous as you sort of suggested anymore. And then there's the actual procedure and paperwork that has to be done and put in place. Yesterday, there was a lot of scrambling going on.
So you're saying that some of the cities didn't actually get the needs that they had fulfilled as quickly and as dutifully as they would have needed. There was a disconnect in communication either between the cities and the county or between the county and the state.
So I was on a Brightline train back from Orlando yesterday. We got stuck for an hour on the track in between the airport and Aventura, where I spoke to Director Guthrie, Monica Sapero from Broward County. She's like, we're at a level 3. She's like, I'm ready, I'm available. Clay Pacheco, my staff person, is now calling out to cities because we haven't heard a lot of requests from some. The disconnect seemed to be with how those requests were actually being inputted to some extent, especially in some really hard hit areas. And then there was just a scrambling for emergency services. I think it's about protocol and procedure. Broward County was ready. I spoke to Mayor Cava last night on the 4-hour trip to go 5 miles from the Aventura Brightline back to my home. And I said, check in with Director Guthrie and just make sure we're on the same page. Miami-Dade County, as you know, is huge. So while we have cars submerged in Sunny Isles, we're very far from Brickell. We're very far from Westchester and Medley and Miami Beach. And we can tighten up the whole communication system. But
do you think that there is not as much of a priority placed in the northeast parts of the county, Miami-Dade County I'm talking about, Aventura, Sunny Isles, as there is in worrying and developing resources for Brickell and Miami Beach?
I think whatever process and procedure is in place, I think we need to take a look at. I'm not saying it's by design. I'm not saying it's intentional. I'm just saying that there are, I think historically and traditionally, some cities that like to go it alone because they have the resources. The city of Aventura, for instance, is not shy about spending on both on infrastructure, on equipment, and having those things available.
I want to broaden this out a little bit because we're talking about this at the same time that, the state of Florida now is, and the governor is removing the words climate change from a lot of state processes. He's, the folks around him, they're fighting back against people who say that any of this is related to climate change, saying Florida's just a low-lying state, and so get over it. This is the way things are going to be. And at the same time, the governor has also in recent months been touting the amount of money that he spent on infrastructure improvements. And in an April press release, he talked about the infrastructure improvements through the Resilient Florida Grant Program that he says has funded $1.8 billion in infrastructure improvements designed to prevent flooding across the state, 320 some odd projects, 320 some odd grants. I guess, do you give the governor credit on those programs, or is enough being done, or is he premature in declaring victory as terms of dealing with the issues of resiliency?
I do, and I have. A few years ago, I sort of joked about it online, but the governor's office cut and vetoed about $7 or $8 million in funding for water projects. We call water projects, whether it's stormwater, whether it's septic to sewer conversion, those are water projects, drainage, other issues, pump stations. He cut $7-8 million out of my budget, and people were upset. And then he came and made announcements in my district awarding $66.5 million for those same projects and even giving more money. So I even joked, listen, I'm proud of authorship, but it's the partisan political piecemeal nature of it, of we'll get to it when we get to it. Jim, a healthy share of my district are of all political persuasion. Many of my city mayors and elected officials are Republicans, some are Democrats. And this week when he signs the budget and he cuts critical infrastructure dollars out of anticipated funding for some of these projects all the way up the coast of my district, it's got to be rather disheartening. So I'm okay with whatever the rules are going to be, whatever the parameters are going to be, but let's sit to them. The late Senator Gwen Margolis, I remember her telling me that in better times, when people were more collegial in the legislature and with the executive branch, every senator was allotted about $20 million for their district, right? And they basically, they were charged by their constituents and elected to that position based on, hopefully, on their priorities and their values. And they were able to allocate and designate where those dollars should go. I don't know what happened to that. I've remarked over the last year or so, especially to the incoming president, we should probably return to that. Because if we were allotted an equal amount of dollars, then we would be able to triage and apply those dollars.
And the idea being that since you're the senator for the area, you know the district best and you know the needs, as opposed to, sending it up to Tallahassee, where a large group of people are trying to decide whether or not there should be stormwater treatment projects in Aventura or Hollywood or Fort Lauderdale. So that's the idea, is keep it as close to the local representative as possible.
My first year in office, I tried to get a septic to source study done for the city that you live in. I couldn't get the funding, but an equal amount of funding was given to a quilting museum in Gilchrist County, Florida.
Well, I want to go back to, you said that there were cuts in the budget, because ironically, as this storm was hitting us, the governor was signing the state budget and issuing veto messages for tens of millions, I'm not even sure how many, maybe hundreds of millions in line item vetoes. You talked about some of the projects that would have applied to a situation like this, that would have helped with flooding, that were vetoed. Can you identify those specifically?
Sure. So I have, I have 20 cities. I put in, I think, 44 total funding requests. 23 were slated to be funded. He vetoed 12 of them, leaving us 11. But, and I'm going to refer to a list here if you don't mind, because it's so fresh. But we had a resilience project in Pompano Beach that was funded for $1 million that he vetoed. We had a hardening mitigation improvement, even for the police facility, which is obviously important during emergency times in Pembroke Park, vetoed $562,000. We had a city of Hollywood. They needed a backup generator. You saw the flooding that was in Hollywood. We got $400,000 for them. That was vetoed. The city of Hallandale Beach hit the hardest yesterday, I would say. You saw on pictures and video for a street expansion and waste access project of $920,000. And a road safety improvements as well in Fort Lauderdale that was vetoed for about $240,000. So again, the argument's going to be, we're doing a lot, we're throwing a lot of money, but when you take, a $1.2 billion, 320 projects that you mentioned earlier here, and you divide that by 411 municipalities and 67 counties, I want to go back to if it's not polarized, if it doesn't have to be partisan, but let's just use data. Let's use math. Okay. We are meant to triage where we're doing undergrounding and hardening of overhead lines, for instance, which are pervasive throughout my district still. But we can't get a published list of which cities are on that list, until they get to them, even though your viewers, my constituents, are paying that into their FPL rate. I'm okay with whatever the parameters are, as long as we're using like real data and math. And unfortunately, the lion's share of funding goes to the majority party members. My caucus of the 12 of us saw anywhere from 40 to 65% cuts in our appropriations projects. And I think our Republican colleagues probably hovered around 20. But our needs are not less severe than those of Republicans in a different area, and probably more so.
And a lot of those projects, again, related to stormwater runoff and drainage and hardening. I mean, I know that Chevron Jones, Senator Jones has complained about that. Senator Polsky, I think, got hit. Those are the projects you're talking about. So in essence, South Florida gets hit ridiculously hard, in part because there are so many Democrats representing here.
Sure, but I will tell you that the Senate President, Kathleen Passidomo of Naples, I noticed on 16 pages of budget cuts from the veto in very small font, that even a septic tank mitigation program in the Naples area was cut as well. So if there's a different pot of money, which I know there is, and it's available, I just want to be ecumenical with the application and distribution of those dollars.
When we come back, Miami-Dade Mayor Daniella Levine Cava was hauled into federal court to explain to a judge why the county hasn't opened up its long-awaited mental health facility. We'll hear from the reporter inside that hearing when we return. Stay with us. Welcome back. For nearly 2 decades, Miami-Dade County officials have been working on opening a mental health facility that could treat people with mental illnesses rather than arresting them and warehousing them in local jails. The county has spent more than $50 million renovating a building and developing a plan to offer those services. For years, the county has been promising that that facility, known as the Miami Center for Mental Health and Recovery, will soon be open. But then nothing happens. Well, this week, U.S. District Court Judge Beth Bloom was tired of the county's broken promises and ordered Mayor Daniella Levine Cava to appear in court and explain why the facility, which Cava promised Judge Bloom would be open at the start of 2024, still wasn't open. Miami Herald reporter Brittany Wallman was at the hearing, and I asked her what happened.
It was really incredible, and it was a lengthy hearing. I think it was at least an hour. And I think there was a lot going on beneath the surface, to say the least. But the judge was clearly 100% behind the idea of this mental health facility. She mentioned multiple times that she had been on a tour of the facility last November. She was just apoplectic that she could not get an answer as to when this thing would be open.
I tried to count. You did a masterful job in your story of like documenting every time. I'm sure it wasn't even every time, but just to create a rhythm of the number of times she asked the question, when will this facility be open? What is keeping this facility from opening? Like, I don't know if she asked it a dozen times or at least a dozen times, but it seemed as if she couldn't get an answer to that question, which is why she had to keep asking it.
That's right. And of course, as journalists, we've been in that, we've experienced that many times where you get the non-answer and the non-answer and the answer that's not an answer. And and as I said, this is over at least an hour and she's asking over and over again. And, they're saying, well, there needs to be a vote. Okay, a vote. When's the meeting and what time? And, that she never got that. The best that we got was without a guarantee that this would open sometime this year, but with the caveat that it would be some programming. What does that mean? It wasn't said.
No, this facility, obviously the brainchild of and the work of Judge Steve Leifman. But I'll say I know that Judge Leifman can at times be a polarizing figure. He, in his passion and his zeal to try to get something done, he tends to sort of rub people wrong at times. And I know he testified as well. And I was told he was actually pretty calm and steady in his testimony. What exactly did he tell the court?
Well, it was really interesting because the judge did say during the hearing that she invited him. So, he's a judge himself. He's there as a witness. And then she just allowed him to give his spiel. And I'm sure everybody in that room has heard that spiel 100 times because he's very passionate about why he believes this would help people in the community with severe mental illness, whether they're inmates now or they're homeless. And so she did give him the floor to just go through it, all over again. And she made it very clear that even though this is not a listed requirement in the federal consent decree, the agreement between the federal government and the county, and she sees it as a necessary solution to the problem.
Right around the time she took that tour of the facility last year, within days of that, there was a suicide at the county jail that she was unaware of until later.
Yeah, I think that when she learned that that suicide had taken place just 4 days after she had toured that center, that it seemed like that was that really touched her. And she just couldn't help but feel that if this project had opened on time, which what would that be, 10 years ago? I mean, the thing's been in the works for decades, really. That this man's life might have been saved. I mean, there have been multiple suicides, and that, that the suicide of inmates is one of the key problems, that they're trying to solve. And
we should point out, just real quick, we should point out, though, to give them credit, there have been no suicides that we know of so far this year at the county jail.
Right,
that suicide took place last November. So in the last 6-7 months, there haven't been any suicides. But still, it's still a concerning thing because I know one of the things Judge Leifman testified to was that the jails are now even more populated with people suffering from mental illness issues than even previously that we've had at the county jail. I think it's almost 3/4 or 2/3.
That's what he said. He
Yeah.
said that 75%. And he said that there were, I think, at least 5,000 inmates last year who would have met the criteria to be sent to this center. And right now there are not sufficient beds to deal with them. And I think the judge felt frustrated that the federal civil rights attorneys were siding with the county and saying, everything's fine, because what she kept coming back to is, if everything's fine, then how come after this guy killed himself, a whole bunch of reforms were made? That sounds like you're just putting Band-Aids on the problem. And the federal, officials were just saying, well, that's just, that is not speaking to any deficiency on the county's part. We're just going above and beyond. So here you had, the civil rights attorneys and the county together saying, much progress has been made. And the judge is saying, well, I want this center open. When is it going to open?
And I think that, look, it's a complicated issue on some levels. It goes to, I think, a couple of factors as to why the center has opened. I don't know why the mayor wouldn't just address this more directly. It's both a combination of funding, a stable funding source from the county commission, and also finding the vendor to operate the facility, to provide the mental health services and the other services that the center will be able to give to people who have mental illnesses. And so it's those two factors, and I get it. It's hard finding a vendor, and it's hard coming up with money and the amount of money that's necessary. Add to that, my understanding is, what's complicating this is, some of these services are now being met by Jackson Memorial Hospital. And so as a result, you have Jackson picking up some of the slack. You have this facility that's built but not open. And it just seems like there's no coordination. It's almost like you need a mental health czar to come in and say, this is it. And I guess that's the role that Judge Bloom is playing right now, is the czar over this, trying to get things moving.
She seems to have a lot of leverage because I don't think the county can come out from under the federal oversight without her blessing. And so, it did strike me during the hearing thinking, if it weren't for Judge Bloom, what might happen with this building? I mean, $51 million has been spent renovating it. And there's been a lot of talk, about the vision for it. But as you say, when it comes down to the details and, the mayor's not able to approve this on her own. The county commission has to approve it. And, that's when things can go south.
The mayor's office sent me a statement. I'll read it. Under the mayor's leadership, corrections has achieved substantial federal compliance, and the federal judge recognized that. As a longtime champion of mental health services, the mayor has committed to seek operational funding for the new mental health facility with commission approval. Despite being built without a clear operational plan, the mayor told the court she is working on the plan as we balance competing and equally critically important county funding priorities. We will get it done and with a clear plan and in working closely with the Board of County Commissioners. I can't help but also read there's a tinge there of defensiveness by the mayor when she writes to me, despite being built without a clear operational plan. This project started under her predecessor, Carlos Jimenez. It's a project that is spearheaded by Judge Levine. And, you begin to wonder, and again, I'm not going to ask you to speculate, whether or not the mayor just doesn't feel as if this is her baby, so therefore she hasn't pushed it and moved it along.
Well, to that point, when Judge Levine was asked by Judge Bloom, what's missing here? What is necessary? He said leadership. So I was looking at the mayor at that moment to see if she was grimacing, but she had a poker face. But
was it tense? How tense was it in the courtroom during all of this?
It was absolutely, it felt like people were seething, but, they were lobbing compliments at one another. But as I said, I think beneath the surface, there's politics and friction and
egos and tension and all those sorts of things. Yes.
Yeah. But, you've got a federal judge on Judge Leifman's side, and she wants the center open. She wants it used to keep mentally ill inmates out of the jail. And, you're going to argue with the federal judge? I mean,
and the judge said another hearing for October, so it gives them a few months. And, if the county comes back in there without a better plan or a better idea of when this place is going to open, I don't think it's going to go, I think it's going to be even more tense in that courtroom.
That's right. I'll have my notebook there. Yeah.
That one I'll make. That one I'm going to be there for. All right. Brittany, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
We'll be right back after the break. If you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to contact me at jdefede@cbs.com. I do enjoy hearing from you. Well, that's all the time we have. We'll be back again next week. Thanks again for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.